She wasn't issued a rifle. She wasn't on the manifest as anything but observer. Captain Maya Rios stepped off the second Hilux into the Pamir's thin light and felt the mountain bite the air right out of her lungs. The ridgeline was a gray saw laid against a white sky, its teeth gnawing at the wind until it came down in shredded, contrary pieces. Below, a hanging valley opened like a broken amphitheater. Talus, caves, old river scars, and a wash of pale grass beaten flat by weather older than empires. Senior Chief Evan Rourke didn't love visitors. He loved outcomes. His raiders fanned out without a sound, boots gripping shale. The sniper element, Petty Officer Idris Dartsey and Sergeant Cole Keegan, ghosted toward a black outcrop that promised angles and trouble in equal measure. The comms tech, Lynn Tran, checked her dish and checked the sky again, as if doubting its honesty. "You got what you need, Captain?" Rourke asked, the question shaped by a patience that came from too many fights that didn't care about names or ranks. "Just watching," Maya said. She had compact binoculars, a wind meter that looked like a toy, and a notebook so battered it seemed to belong to someone else. No long rifle. No fancy glass. The unusual thing wasn't her gear. It was her stillness. While everyone else made micro-corrections against the gust, she stood like a plumb line, listening to the valley breathe. Shots would come. They always did. The mission was a confirm and deny. Report of a training camp reappearing where one had been burned out 2 summers ago. Rourke had called it a peak over the edge. But the mountains were full of edges, and each one hid another blade. Upwind, a truck coughed and died. Downwind, a dust devil spun itself into being and then collapsed like a bad idea. Nobody noticed the thread of smoke at first. Maya did. It wasn't cooking smoke. It rose, paused, slid sideways, and broke into 2 layers like oil and water. The valley was lying. They set in quietly. Keegan found prone on a lip of shale. Dartsey set his tripod in a notch where black rock held a chill even under the sun. Range cards came out. Tran's murmured checks stitched the team together. Net green, traffic clean. The mountain replied with a long, indifferent silence. Then the first shot broke it. Dartsey suppressed crack, precise and sure. A fleck of stone leapt from the far slope a meter right of a man who hadn't believed he was seen. "Mirage is boiling," Keegan said, working his bolt, calm and annoyed. He took his shot and missed left. Same target 2 breaths later. "No way it moved that far." "Layered shear," Maya said softly, eyes never leaving her glass. No one answered. Her hand tapped the notebook, counting. 30, 27, 31. The gusts were cycling out of rhythm. One layer ran north to south. The one above it did the opposite, and in the heat ripple between them, light itself learned to lie. On the far side, silhouettes ducked and reappeared, casual in the way of people who were at home in the terrain. A second shot from Keegan sparked low. "Dope's good," he said. "Air's crooked." The reply came as if to agree. A rattle of PKM searching the ridge. Chips of shale ticked across Keegan's sleeve. Rourke slid behind cover, calm gone flinty. "We're seen," he said, not raising his voice. "Not seen," Maya murmured. "Predicted." She sketched a line in the notebook, then another, then drew a box at a cave mouth that looked like every other cave mouth. "There's spotters there. You're shooting through a mirage seam that splits and recombines at 40-second intervals." "English," Rourke said. "Your bullets fly through 2 winds and a funhouse mirror." Dartsey swore under his breath and sent another round. The valley laughed in heat. Somewhere below, a runner lifted his arm to pass a signal. Maya watched the dust off his heel, not his hand. The dust drifted left at his ankle and right at his knee. "That's the tempo," she said. They planned for noon. The first mortar took a bite out of empty slope. The second walked closer, patient as a man counting stairs. By the third, Tran was already down behind a slab, hands tight over her ears, eyes wide but clear. "Audio of the launch," she said, not quite yelling. 68 seconds from thump to kiss. "Adjust fire," someone shouted in the valley. Too far to see the mouth, close enough to feel the intention. Rourke felt the angle of this trap, its edges fitted to known American patterns. Move and die on the traverse. Stay and drown in he. Keegan, Dartsy, we have to break their correction chain, Rourke said. Find me the eyes. Already found, Maya said, and pointed without looking up. 10 degrees right of that split tamarisk elevation line, too. He's not showing. He doesn't have to. He's using a corner reflector. Keegan didn't argue. He shifted, breathed, sent it. The round took a sliver off rock. Hold for drop, Maya said, still counting, eyes on the mirage. 3-2 now. Dartsy pressed it now, and the reflector hiccuped into a cloud of glittering dust. The fourth mortar splashed blind into a dry creek. The return fire didn't stop. It got smarter. A DSHK stitched above their cover with a surgeon's rhythm, walking the recoil like it had a metronome. Rourke measured the distance between the beats and the distance between his men. We're bracketed, he said. If we pop smoke, it will ride the wrong wind. It will, Maya agreed. So use their wind. She flipped her notebook open to a page laminated with old tape. It was a matrix of wind calls fattened with scribbles, scars on paper. She stuffed it in Rourke's hand. Shift your positions on my count. 2 meters left for Dartsy, 1 back for Keegan. You want to be in the seam, not the stream. On your count, Rourke said, eyebrows flat. On the valleys. She clocked the 31 seconds. The dust over the wash bent. Move. They did. The heavy burst skated where they'd been. Shale dust ticked against Rourke's cheek. Tran said, we just made someone in the valley swear in Pashto. Good, Maya said. Make them swear again. A round snapped past Tran's dish and rang off a rock as if someone had struck a wine glass. Keegan swore and went quiet. Rourke belly crawled to him and saw why. A neat coin-size hole in Keegan's forearm guard. Ugly bloom underneath. Not catastrophic. Not ignorable. You're out, Rourke said. Like hell. Rourke took the rifle to move it when Maya slid next to him, small and certain. Let me, she said. You're not on a weapon. He answered, reflex laying down law. He's bleeding on the dope, she said, almost apologetic. She flipped the rifle, checked the zero stop out of habit that didn't belong to an observer, dialed back 2 clicks, then forward 3, then pressed her cheek to the cheek rest like a prayer. I need your watch, she told Rourke. He gave it without a line of argument he would revisit later. She set the watch beside the rifle. Face up, seconds hand a bright sweep. She inhaled, exhaled, waited. The crack came softer than its consequence. In the valley, a man who had believed the mirage more than mortality folded against his own cover. Lucky, Dartsy said, because saying holy wasn't useful. Predictable, Maya said, already shifting to the next lane. Their wind stacks reset every 90 seconds as the sun clears that spur. Listen to the gravel behind us. Rourke listened, because he suddenly realized he had been all along. Microslides of rock hissed one way, then the other. Even the mountain couldn't make up its mind. She wrote on her laminated page with a golf pencil worn to a nub. Spur clear plus 8/1.2 mil hold. A bullet snapped inches short. She did not blink. The second shot took the spotter who'd been calling for the DSHK. The third kissed the barrel jacket of the heavy and made its recoil a problem its crew didn't have time to solve. Captain, Rourke said, and paused on the rank as if it were a question. Who trained you? She didn't look away from the glass. The wind, she said, and a few people who don't show up in PowerPoint. The valley adjusted. Smart men under stress do. Smokes blossomed, thick and oily, rolling along the wash in a gray tide. The world narrowed to shadows and flashes. They're masking movement, Trance said, and they know our angles. Maya rolled her shoulders once, as if shedding a weight. Good. Give me heat. She pulled a folded sheet of mylar from her cargo pocket, camping trash pressed flat, and kept on purpose. She handed it to Tran. Hold this at that notch. Flash twice on my count. You're going to bait them, Rourke said. I'm going to let them confirm a thing they want to be true, she corrected. They think our glass is up here. Let's make it greedy. Tran flashed once, twice. The DSHK, grateful, devoured the glint. Its line of fire swung wide, chewing smoke, shredding a ghost. Now, Maya said, and Dartsy put a round into the plume where the muzzle flash had just been, aiming not at light, but at the eddy the flash made as it pushed smoke aside. The heavy choked and fell silent. A man stumbled out, coughing, and didn't get back up. "Mortaline?" Rourke asked. "Blind without eyes," Maya said. "They could try to bracket by terrain association, but they'll be guessing." A new sound reached them, not a thump or a rattle, but a metallic cough from the far slope, almost polite. Darcy's mouth went flat. "Recoilless. A 14.5 could reach our exfil LZ," Tran said. "It will," Maya answered too calmly. She watched smoke like it was a living thing. "Unless we change the rhythm." "Ow?" Rourke asked. She slid Keegan's rifle back to him, now bandaged and glaring. Then she reached for her own nothing and made it something. Drew a stubby pistol, checked its slide, holstered it again. "We go forward." She looked for an instant exactly like an officer giving a classroom answer, and then exactly nothing like that when she moved. "Cover her," Rourke said, because saying don't wouldn't stop the mountain or her. She went off the ridge in a diagonal that made no sense unless you could see the invisible, veering in a shade to cheat mirage, skipping across slabs that held cool pockets of air where wind slowed to think. Enemy fire chased her, late by the length of a breath and the width of a lie, chewing rock where she had been and would not be again. Two men tried to cut her off from a split in the smoke. She beat them to the edge of their own plan. Sidearm up, two pairs, firm and neat, the economy of a skill practiced long before the mountain tested it. "Who are you?" Tran whispered into her mic, forgetting the push to talk. "Someone with a boring job title," Maya said, feet finding purchase without looking down. She reached a low spur that split the valley's breadth and dropped behind it, vanishing from the team's line. For a moment, Rourke felt the same gut-empty lurch he'd felt watching friends go through doors and not come back. 2 minutes to that smoke thinning, Darcy said, watching wind like a clock. Rourke tracked the scenario's collapse and rebirth. His left flank no longer pinned, his right uncertain, his observer now the fulcrum of a very bad idea that was somehow the only good one left. He measured the line between leadership and trust, and then he chose trust. "All stations, lift fire 5 degrees high of the wash. Don't spool the ricochets." It was a bad radio sentence. It worked. The team raised the threat without feeding it. In the gray below, something bright winked twice. Metal? No, glass. A scope? No, wrong angle. Maya's voice came soft. "Recoilless team is using a periscope mirror to spot over their rock. My shot will break on the mirror. Darcy, be ready to take the gunner when he peeks. He will." "How do you know he will?" Darcy asked. "Pride," she said, and squeezed. The mirror popped like a bubble. The gunner's face rose a fraction. Furious at the trick, Darcy put a hole where fury lived. The smoke thinned like an argument running out of breath. Shapes reassembled into men again. Maya slid to a stop beside a broken cairn and laid flat, disappearing into the relief as if the rock had remembered her. She spoke without panting. "They wired the wash with a command detonating cord. Fiber line under the gravel. They're holding us with fire and waiting for us to drop off the ridge along the obvious path." "How sure?" Rourke asked, already restructuring his exfil routes in his head and finding them ugly. 70% from the way the smoke pools by the bend, Maya said. 30 from the ants' path. "What ants?" "The line of footprints that aren't deep enough for men but straight enough for a cable." She exhaled slow. "Give me 30 seconds. "You don't have cutters," Rourke said. "I do," she answered, and pulled a whip-thin blade from her sleeve, the steel black with a matte finish that ate light. She slipped into the wash itself, as if going underwater. The air above her trembled. Time went strange, long and rolled tight at the same time. Tran counted seconds in Rourke's ear. 20, 22, 25. "There," Maya said, and the valley changed pitch. The waiting stopped. The trapped feeling loosened, like a jaw unclenching. She'd severed the line and tucked both ends under rock. The simplest trick in the world, the hardest to do when bullets were writing punctuation around your body. Keegan breathed. "What unit teaches you to listen for ants?" The question sounded like a prayer that didn't care who answered. Maya climbed back to the spur with a calm that belonged in another life and chambered a round with a movement so clean it erased the earlier sentence about her not being issued a rifle. "A unit that doesn't have a patch," she said. "Keep the center pinned. I'm going to take the conductor." "Conductor?" Rourke asked. "The one with the radio who never shoots. He's on the high scree above the old landslide. He rotates his antenna to ride the seam when the wind shifts. That's your rhythm caller." The conductor lived in a wedge of shadow that looked like nothing. His mistake was believing the mountain made him invisible the way it did everyone else. Maya watched the shimmer bend around his antenna in a stutter that didn't match the wind. He was turning for a better signal. The shot was long by their days, standard and dirty, 600 and change, messed with by two winds that didn't like each other, half a man in cover, and a background that dripped lies. She took her time the way people take their time, signing their name on a promise. She let the seconds hand on Rourke's watch roll through one full arc. At 31 seconds, the seam reset. At 32, a dragonfly stuttered, and at 33, the glare off a grain of mica winked out. She pressed at 34, the trigger a slope she had known for years, and the man with the radio went boneless into his ruin of rocks. The valley came apart. Tactics fell into local decisions. The men below stopped being a net and became threads. Some charged, some ran, some lay down and tried to be less alive than the stones. The recoilless team folded their kit like they were pretending it had never happened. For the first time since the first bad shot, the fight felt winnable by something other than chance. "Push left," Rourke said, and his voice had meat again. Darcy's next 2 rounds were punctuation, not questions. Keegan's arm held. His eye held better. Tran dragged her dish and lit the LZ with coordinates that would still be good if the wind forgot itself. Maya didn't stop. She stitched through the pieces of what had been an excellent plan, taking the men who made other men brave and the men who held the map in their head. Once, she held her shot for a woman hauling a box of ammunition because the look on her face was just hunger and fear and a stubbornness that belonged anywhere but here. The bullet went past her to a man who had already decided to kill with it. Rourke watched the arithmetic of the fight simplify until it looked like subtraction. The helicopter's rotors smudged the air with a noise that erased thoughts at the edges. Dust rose, then fled. The team boarded in a practice tangle of pain and gear. Maya climbed last, taking the seat by the open door without being told, eyes on the valley as if it were a classroom with a final exam scheduled without warning. Rourke buckled in and looked at her the way you look at a tool you've used for years but never really seen. "We were a forecast, and they read us," he said. "Then you changed the weather." "Not the weather," she said, watching the wash shrink to a thin thread of lighter earth. "Just the way we listened to it. Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "In a place that doesn't issue medals and hates photographs," she said, not unkindly. Keegan sat with his arm propped awkwardly and stared at the laminated page she'd left on his pack. Spur clear +8/1.2, mirror pop, seemed 31 to 34 seconds. He slid the stubby golf pencil into the laminate's cracked edge and said, "Taking this." "It's yours," Maya said. "Add to it." Wind changes. She looked tired now in a way that no nap fixes, used up at the edges, bright at the center. Tran leaned forward against her straps. "We're never going to see you again, are we?" Maya smiled, a small thing, honest and gone quickly. "If you do, I'll be using another name." Rourke opened his mouth and closed it on a dozen questions that didn't matter anymore. He tapped his watch face, the seconds hand still sweeping as if the mountain's trickery had been gossip, not law. "You want this back?" he asked. "Keep it," she said. "Set on 31 once in a while. Remember that the air lies, and then it tells the truth, and the difference is all you get to work with." Back on base, debrief smelled like coffee and the cold metal of rooms that lie for a living. People asked what they always ask: who fired, who fell, who planned, who failed. Rourke answered with nouns and verbs, not adjectives. He said a thing about a seam in about 31 seconds and watched a colonel pretend it meant nothing. Keegan cleaned his rifle like it was a pen with which he meant to write fewer misspellings. Darcy taped the laminate to the inside of his hard case and wrote in the corner of the air, as crooked and underlined it twice. Tran logged corrections and coordinates, then printed a single page for her binder. Pamir, walk-in shelf, seam cycle observed, addendum, bring mylar. She labeled it Rios method, then crossed it out and wrote listening method instead. Rourke went to the armory and opened his hand over the counter. The man behind it glanced at the object on Rourke's palm, a sliver of shattered mirror with dust ground into its edges. "We issuing those now?" the armor asked. "It's a reminder," Rourke said, "that we like to shoot what we can see. And sometimes what we see is a lie sold by heat and pride." He carried the mirror to the team room and set it beside a watch with a seconds hand the color of a cheap toy. He hung a scrap of mylar above them with a strip of duct tape. The little altar looked stupid and correct. In the Pamir, the wash settled back into its old shrug. Wind combed the grass. Dust found new places to wait. Spent brass rolled into cracks to become the mountain's property. If anyone went there later, they would see nothing. That was the mountain's way. In a notebook laminated and patched smooth by time, someone added a line. "Believe the drift, doubt the shimmer." Below it, a smaller hand wrote, "Change the rhythm." Nobody wrote her name. They didn't need to. The next time a valley tried to sing a team into staying where it could be killed, somebody would set a watch to 31 seconds, and somebody would flash a scrap of foil, and somebody would look for ants where there should be none. And the mountain, inscrutable and old, might,